In 1979, a house in Virginia swallowed every family that dared to live there, vanishing them without a trace. For decades, it stood empty, silent, yet somehow watching. And then, 40 years later, one of the lost returned. But what came back was not entirely the same. October 3rd, 1979, Robert and Lisa Harrow had dreamed of owning their own home for years. After weekends hunting for neighborhoods across Charlottesville, they finally found the perfect two-story red brick house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. Its tall windows reflected the fading autumn sunlight, and the front porch stretched wide enough for 2 rocking chairs. Lisa held their daughter Grace's tiny hand as she whispered, "This is it." Finally, Robert, still clutching his briefcase from a long day at the bank, smiled. Quiet streets, neighbors who mind their own business. What could go wrong? The realtor, Marjorie Fields, showed them around with practiced cheer. She waved off any questions about previous tenants. "House has character," she said vaguely. "Families love it." No one mentioned the disappearances. That evening, as the Harrows unpacked, subtle oddities began. Grace, who had always slept soundly, sat on the living room carpet talking to someone invisible. "Who are you playing with, sweetie?" Lisa asked, voice gentle. Grace giggled. "He's nice. He said he'd play with me." Robert laughed nervously. "Maybe a new friend, huh?" Later that night, strange thuds echoed above their bedroom ceiling. Lisa clutched the blanket, heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" "Probably just the house settling," Robert replied, though unease crept into his chest. Even the neighbors seemed off. Mr. Gaines, an elderly man next door, had watched the Harrows move in from his porch. When Robert waved, Gaines only muttered, "They never stay. No one stays." Then he turned and disappeared into his house. Lisa shivered. "Why would anyone invent something like this?" She whispered to Robert. October 5th. By Friday, the house's oddities intensified. Grace's toys moved overnight, always appearing in different rooms. The old grandfather clock chimed at odd hours, 2:17 a.m., 3:43 a.m., sometimes stopping mid-chime. Lisa thought she heard her name whispered from the basement as she stirred soup. "Robert?" she called. Silence. Only the refrigerator hummed in reply. Then came the notes. Small pieces of paper appeared in Grace's handwriting, though she insisted she hadn't written them. "He waits." "Don't be afraid." Lisa held one, trembling. "Grace didn't write this." Robert frowned. "Someone must be playing a prank." "Or the house is settling." That night, Robert checked the basement. The door creaked open on its own. Cold air rushed upward, carrying the metallic scent of rust. As he stepped closer, something brushed his ankle. He froze, heart hammering. October 12th. Rumors reached the Harrows quickly. One neighbor recalled, "The Benson family vanished overnight, left everything behind, even their cat." Another shook his head. "This house doesn't like people staying too long." Lisa tried to laugh it off. Stories, just old stories. But that night, Grace vanished. The living room was empty, the window ajar, papers scattered by a chilly wind. Her favorite doll lay on the porch, staring glassy-eyed at them. "No?" Lisa whispered. Sergeant Fields, a grizzled local officer, arrived quickly. "We've seen this before," he said quietly. "Every family disappears eventually. But why? Who knows? Why would anyone invent something like this?" October 15th. The Harrows tried to move on, but small incidents multiplied. Lights flickered for no reason, mirrors showed shadows that weren't there, and soft whispers echoed through empty hallways. One evening, Robert returned from work to find the kitchen in disarray. Drawers opened, utensils scattered. Grace's favorite blanket was gone. Lisa looked at him, eyes wide. "Something is in this house." "Something alive," the couple argued, fearing they were losing their minds, but the house seemed to feed on their doubts, growing colder, heavier. October 20th, late one night, Lisa awoke to Grace crying. She rushed to the living room but found nothing. A faint cold hand grazed her shoulder. She spun around. Empty air. Robert found strange markings near the basement door, scratch marks in patterns that looked deliberate. "What is this?" Robert whispered. Lisa shook her head. "I don't know. I don't know anymore." October 25th, 1979, neighbors began avoiding the Harrows. Mail deliveries slowed. Even the mailman shook his head, muttering, "Be careful. That house watches." Grace's disappearance weighed heavily on the couple. Robert kept returning to the basement, hoping for a clue. Each time, shadows seemed to twist unnaturally, almost alive. October 31st, Halloween night. The Harrows sat in the dark living room, candles flickering. The grandfather clock chimed, once, twice, 12 times. Though it was 3:43 a.m., a small, trembling hand emerged from the corner. Grace, perhaps, but the hand didn't reach out. It pointed toward the basement, darkness swirling like liquid shadow. "Daddy," a tiny, unfamiliar voice whispered. Then, the lights went out. In 1979, a house in Virginia swallowed every family that dared to live there. Grace's disappearance was only the beginning. The house was far from done, and those who remained soon realized. It was watching, learning, and waiting. November 2nd, 1979. The police investigation had yielded nothing. Sergeant Fields shook his head during a brief debrief with Robert and Lisa. "Look, we've combed the area, checked the riverbanks, searched the woods," Fields said, rubbing his temples. "There's nothing. No tracks, no signs of a struggle. And you're not the first. That house has a history. Families vanish, but why? Who knows?" Lisa clutched Robert's arm, trembling. "We can't just leave her there. Grace, she's alive. She has to be." Robert nodded, though his eyes were hollow. "We'll find her. I'll check the house every inch if I have to." Even the neighbors were wary. Marjorie Fields, the realtor, avoided eye contact. "Some houses you just don't touch. Some houses hold things you can't explain. Maybe it's best to move on, but leaving wasn't an option. Their home was meant to be permanent." November 5th. That weekend, Lisa noticed small but disturbing occurrences. Shoes were misplaced. Objects appeared in rooms they hadn't been before. A rocking chair that had never moved creaked gently in the living room, though no one had touched it. Late at night, soft whispering came from the hallways. Words she couldn't understand, punctuated with what sounded like a child's laughter. Grace's? Or something imitating her? Robert tried to stay rational. It's the house settling. Old wood. Wind through the windows. But even he could not explain the shadow he saw darting past the kitchen doorway at 2:17 a.m., the same time the grandfather clock always chimed strangely. November 10th. Lisa began noticing movement from the corner of her eye. Curtains shifted, though windows were closed. Cold spots on the floor where the carpet shouldn't have been colder. Sometimes when she walked through a hallway, it felt like the air itself resisted her, as if something unseen pressed against her chest. Robert confronted the house directly one night, flashlight in hand. He muttered, "Show yourself. I need to know what's here." The basement door slowly creaked open. No wind, no one there, but the smell of damp metal and decay rose like a warning. "Robert!" Lisa called, sensing the danger. He stepped back, but not before a faint handprint appeared on his shoulder, ice cold. No one touched him. November 12th. A few neighbors finally broke their silence. "You should leave," said Mrs. Aldridge, a retiree who lived down the street. "I was a child when my family moved in. They never came back. People talk, but no one listens until it's too late. That house doesn't like visitors." Robert frowned. "Why haven't the police done anything?" Mrs. Aldridge shook her head. "Why would anyone invent something like this?" "Some things you just don't question." "You survive," Lisa whispered. "Survive." "Survive what?" No one answered. November 15th. The Harrows tried to maintain a routine. Robert worked, Lisa cooked, and they kept the house in order. Yet objects continued to move. Cutlery was found in the bathtub. Grace's toys appeared in the attic. Notes with childish handwriting, though clearly not Grace's, were left on the staircase. We watch. We wait. Robert attempted to record these incidents on a tape recorder, hoping for proof. At 3:43 a.m., a whisper echoed through the living room. The tape picked up a voice. "Come down." "Come see." Both Robert and Lisa froze. November 20th. Days turned into weeks. Sleep deprivation and fear began taking a toll. Robert started to see shadows moving independently of the light. Lisa awoke one night to find herself staring at the closet door, which slowly opened on its own. Grace's laughter occasionally echoed through empty rooms, though the girl herself was gone. "Why can't we leave?" Lisa whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's not safe. This house, it's alive." Robert shook his head. "We can't, not without her." Even Sergeant Fields returned to warn them. People vanish here. Families vanish. And if you think you understand it, you don't. None of us do. November 23rd. A breakthrough, or perhaps a cruel trick, occurred when a neighbor claimed to see a child resembling Grace in the living room window. The figure waved, but as the Harrows approached, the child vanished. Lisa fell to her knees. "She's here! She's here!" Robert's rational mind struggled. Or it's the house testing us. Why would anyone invent something like this? That night, the whispers became clearer, calling Grace's name repeatedly. November 28th. The basement remained the epicenter of fear. Doors opened and closed, shadows flickered, and the cold metallic scent always lingered. Robert gathered his courage. Flashlight in hand, he descended the steps slowly. Every step echoed. Halfway down, he heard faint sobbing. "Grace?" he whispered. A voice slightly different, deeper, yet unmistakably hers, replied, "Daddy, come closer." Robert froze. The flashlight flickered. A cold hand brushed past his cheek, leaving frost on his skin. He stumbled backward. "Lisa! Lisa!" The basement went silent. Then, from the darkness, a series of scratches echoed along the wall, spelling a single word. Leave. November 30th, Thanksgiving Eve. Candles flickered in the living room. Robert and Lisa tried to stay calm, but the house pulsed with a presence they could neither see nor name. A small figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Grace? Almost, but the eyes. They were too dark, too hollow. The figure tilted its head, pointing toward the basement, just as the grandfather clock chimed 3:43 a.m. "Daddy." The voice whispered, but the sound wasn't entirely human. Suddenly the lights went out. The air turned icy, and laughter, echoing from every corner, filled the house. The Harrows were trapped, and the house was just beginning to show its true power. By now, the Harrows had realized this house in Virginia was no ordinary home. Grace's disappearance was just the beginning. Strange voices, moving shadows, and invisible hands were only hints of the sinister secret lurking in its walls. And what they were about to discover would change everything. December 5th, 1979. The days following the basement incident brought no comfort. Robert and Lisa tried to maintain some semblance of routine. Robert continued commuting to the bank, but he returned home each night exhausted, eyes heavy with fear. Lisa, alone during the day, would clean or attempt to organize the house. But each task became a test of nerve. Objects still moved without explanation. A kettle might appear in the laundry room. A chair might rock in the middle of the hallway. The house's presence was subtle yet undeniable, pressing against them with an oppressive weight. Lisa began documenting every oddity in a notebook. The entries were meticulous: time, location, description, sometimes sketches of shadows. On December 5th, she wrote, "The walls whisper. I heard a voice calling Grace's name while I folded laundry. The shadows move faster when I watch." Robert read the note silently, the corners of his mouth tight. Why would anyone invent something like this? He muttered aloud, though he knew the question had no answer. December 7th. The next night, Robert returned home to find Lisa staring at a section of the hallway wall. Her flashlight revealed faint scratches etched into the wood, forming an almost deliberate pattern. "Look," she said. "It's like a map." Robert knelt to examine it. His fingers traced the grooves, and suddenly one panel gave way beneath his touch. Behind it, a hidden doorway, long forgotten, leading into darkness. "Lisa, this isn't normal," he whispered. The couple exchanged a glance, a mixture of fear and determination. They grabbed flashlights and descended into the hidden room. The air was damp, reeking of mold and iron. Inside, remnants of previous tenants' lives were scattered: small toys, clothing, a child's shoe. Notes with handwriting similar to Grace's, but older, faded, were pinned to the wall. He watches. He waits. "Don't be afraid," Lisa trembled. This isn't just a house. It's a trap." December 10th. Determined to understand the house, Robert visited the local library. Old newspapers revealed a shocking pattern. Families had been vanishing from this street since the early 1960s. The Benson family in 1964, the Crawford family in 1969, the Harper family in 1975, all gone without a trace. Each report mentioned unexplained sounds, cold drafts, and children talking to unseen figures before disappearances. Robert flipped through microfilm until a page caught his eye. A note from a 1972 realtor warned, "Do not buy. The house has secrets. Every family disappears. Why would anyone invent such a horror? The weight of reality pressed upon him. This was not my imagination. This house had claimed dozens of victims, and now it had Grace. December 12th. At home, the hidden room seemed to amplify the house's presence. Whispers echoed through the hallways constantly now, often repeating Grace's name. Shadows coalesced into human-like forms, watching the Harrows from corners of rooms. Lisa swore she felt hands brush her shoulder when no one was there. At night, small feet scampered in the attic, though no child had been seen. Robert installed a tape recorder in the living room, hoping to catch proof. At 3:43 a.m., the tape played back soft, childish laughter, followed by a distorted voice. They see you. They wait. You can't leave. Lisa dropped the recorder. It's alive, she whispered, tears in her eyes. The house. It's alive. December 15th, another discovery shook them. Notes left around the house, written in multiple hands, spoke of previous tenants. The house takes. It watches. Do not resist. Grace is safe. For now. But he waits. Lisa held one to her chest. Safe? What kind of safety is this? Robert's voice was grim. We need to confront it. We need to understand what's keeping her, or whoever. Here, December 18th. That night, Robert descended into the basement again, flashlight in hand. The stairs creaked underfoot, shadows pooling at the edges of his vision. At the bottom, the metallic smell of decay was overwhelming. A voice called from the darkness, Grace's, yet distorted. Daddy. Come closer. Robert stepped forward, flashlight trembling. A figure emerged, small, childlike, face pale and expressionless. Grace, almost, but the eyes were too dark, too empty. Grace? Robert whispered. The figure tilted its head. Then, in a low, guttural whisper, the voice said, Leave, or join them. A sudden cold wind swept the basement. The flashlight flickered. Robert backed up, hitting the wall, and discovered something horrifying. Scratched into the concrete were the names of all previous tenants. Dozens of names spanning decades, each carved with a frantic desperation. The last name, Grace. December 20th, Lisa uncovered more hidden messages in the attic, etched into floorboards and furniture. Some were pleas for help. Some were warnings. Do not go into the basement. He is patient. He never forgets. I heard Grace laughing. But it wasn't Grace. They realized the house was not only watching, but also feeding on fear, manipulating perception. Every sound, every shadow, every note was designed to trap them further. December 22nd. A violent storm hit Charlottesville that night. Lightning illuminated the house in jagged flashes. Windows rattled. Doors slammed. The hidden room seemed to pulse. Robert tried to reason. It's a storm. Just a storm. But the air grew thick, almost alive. Whispers surrounded them, repeating, Grace! Grace, come home! Lisa froze as the hidden room door slowly opened by itself. From the darkness, a voice, low and menacing, echoed, You cannot leave. No one ever leaves. December 24th, Christmas Eve. The house was silent. Almost. The Harrows huddled together in the living room, candles flickering. A soft sound came from the attic, the distinct laughter of a child. They climbed the stairs slowly, hearts pounding. The attic door creaked open. Inside, dozens of dolls, each with hollow eyes, were arranged in a circle. In the center sat a single toy, Grace's favorite doll. Suddenly, the attic window slammed open. Outside, shadows writhed unnaturally, forming shapes reminiscent of children from decades past. The doll's head slowly turned toward them. A voice, neither Grace's nor fully human, whispered, The house remembers. And it wants more. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed them. By now, the Harrows had discovered the house's terrible secret. The hidden rooms, the whispers, the shadows, these were only preludes. What lurked in the basement and attic was patient, intelligent, and deadly. And now it was ready to strike. December 26th. The morning after the attic incident, Robert and Lisa were shaken to their core. The dolls in the attic remained perfectly arranged, but Grace's absence was palpable. I swear. I saw her, Lisa whispered. Her laughter, but it wasn't her. Robert rubbed his eyes. We need to do something. We can't just sit here. The house, it's alive. It's watching us every second. It's learning. They tried to contact Sergeant Fields, but the line was dead. Even the neighbors avoided their calls. The Harrows were isolated, and the house knew it. December 28th. That night, Robert and Lisa slept lightly, taking turns keeping watch. At 3:43 a.m., the same time the grandfather clock always chimed, a loud crash came from the basement. "Grace?" Lisa called, fear cracking her voice. Robert grabbed a flashlight and descended the stairs. The temperature dropped sharply. His breath misted in the cold air. Shadows twisted unnaturally against the walls. A figure darted past, small, childlike, but moving impossibly fast. Robert swung the flashlight. It illuminated a face, hollow eyes staring into his soul. The figure vanished before he could blink. "Robert, it's coming closer!" Lisa screamed from above. December 30th. Over the next 2 nights, the house's presence grew more aggressive. Doors slammed, lights flickered violently, and every reflective surface, mirrors, windows, even spoons, seemed to show more than a simple reflection. Grace's favorite toy chest opened by itself, spilling blocks across the floor in intricate patterns, almost like messages. One evening, Lisa found a note tucked under a table. "Do not resist. It knows everything. You cannot leave." Robert shivered. "Why would anyone invent something like this?" Lisa shook her head. "It's not a who, it's a what." January 2nd, 1980. Realizing they could not wait for help, the Harrows attempted to leave. They packed clothes, important documents, and a few belongings. As they approached the front door, it slammed shut on its own with a deafening bang. A whisper filled the hallway, low and menacing. "You cannot leave. Not tonight, not ever." Robert tried the windows. Locked. The doors. Locked. The house had trapped them completely. They returned to the living room, panicked, when a shadow stretched across the floor, moving independently of any source of light. It formed a humanoid shape and advanced toward them. Lisa backed into a corner. "We have to fight it. We can't just—" The shadow lunged, knocking her to the ground. Robert grabbed a chair to defend her. The figure recoiled, almost amused, then dissipated into a flicker of darkness. January 5th. By now, the Harrows understood the basement was the source of the house's power. Gathering courage, they descended with flashlights, ropes, and improvised weapons. The basement was colder than ever, the metallic scent of decay overwhelming. Shadows danced across the walls, forming grotesque shapes, twisted versions of past tenants, including the Benson and Crawford families. "Grace?" Lisa called, voice trembling. A small figure appeared at the far end of the room. It was Grace, but changed. Her eyes were darker, hollow, and her movements were jerky. Unnatural. "You should not have come down." A voice echoed through the basement. Neither Grace's nor human. Robert held his breath, flashlight shaking. "We're taking her out. Now!" The figure tilted its head and the shadows surged forward. It wasn't just one entity. It was the house itself, a sentient predator, protecting its own. January 7th. The house's attacks were no longer purely physical. Robert and Lisa began hearing the voices of their friends and family inside the walls, calling for help, begging them to surrender. Doors slammed and locked themselves. Lights flickered in Morse code-like patterns. Grace, or whatever she had become, appeared intermittently in rooms, always just out of reach, always silent. The house seemed to be testing their fear, calculating how far it could push them. Lisa's journal recorded, "I see her everywhere. Her eyes are not her own. Every shadow holds her face. I cannot tell reality from the house. We are losing—" January 10th, a moment of hope arrived when a neighbor, Mr. Gaines, cautiously approached. "I saw the lights flickering." "I thought you were gone," he said. "Somehow, I think there's a way to draw her out. But it's dangerous. You can't fight it head on." Robert and Lisa tried a ritual suggested by Gaines, using candles and old symbols drawn from folklore records in the town archives. For a moment, the house seemed to pause. Shadows retracted, whispers softened. Grace appeared at the top of the stairs, waving, smiling. "Grace!" Lisa cried, rushing toward her. But as soon as they stepped closer, the staircase groaned violently. Shadows erupted like living ink surrounding them. The lights snapped out. January 12th. The house struck back in full force. Every door slammed. Windows shattered. Objects flew through the air. Robert and Lisa were pinned in the living room, the shadows closing in. Grace's voice, familiar but distorted, called from the basement. "Daddy." "Mommy, come down. Join us." The air became icy, and the shadows coalesced into a towering humanoid figure, arms outstretched, face an amalgam of all the missing children. Lisa screamed. Robert tried to shield her. The figure loomed closer. A final whisper echoed around the room. "You cannot leave. Not until you belong." The lights went out, plunging them into darkness. The house had made its move, and survival was no longer certain. The Harrows had survived weeks of terror in the Virginia house, but now the stakes were higher than ever. Shadows, whispers, and distorted visions had been only warnings. The full truth of the house and Grace's fate was about to be revealed. January 15th. The Harrows were exhausted, their bodies trembling from sleepless nights. Every attempt to flee had failed. Sergeant Fields, after much persuasion, agreed to accompany them one final time. "This is no ordinary house," Fields warned. "Every family that went missing, they didn't just vanish. Something in here takes a piece of them. It's alive, and it learns." Robert gripped his flashlight tightly. "We're not leaving without Grace. We don't care what it takes." Lisa nodded, voice tight with fear. "We're going in." January 16th. The basement had been the epicenter of terror, and they returned there armed with light, rope, and courage. The cold metallic smell was stronger than ever. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching unnaturally, as though testing their resolve. At the far end, a figure stood. Grace, or what it looked like. Her face was pale, eyes hollow, lips quivering, but words unreadable. Behind her, the shadows began to move as if alive. Sergeant Fields whispered, "It's feeding on her." Every fear, every emotion, it grows stronger. The whispers started again, echoing through the walls. "You cannot take her. She belongs to the house." January 18th. In desperation, Robert recalled old town records. The house had been built on a foundation rumored to be cursed, a site where occult rituals had taken place in the early 1800s. Owners who attempted to raise families here reported strange happenings, escalating until the family disappeared. "The house doesn't just trap people," Robert said, voice low. "It absorbs them, keep them, change them." Lisa's face went pale. "Grace, she's not the same." January 20th. Determined, Robert advanced into the basement. Shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, forming past victims, children, adults, even pets, frozen mid-motion. Grace remained in the center, silent, her small body trembling. "Daddy, Mommy," she whispered, voice eerily distorted. A shadow lunged. Robert swung a chair, hitting it. It dissipated momentarily, but reformed instantly. The house was a predator, shapeless yet omnipresent. Lisa tried to reach Grace. As she did, a voice boomed from the walls. "She is mine. All who enter are mine." January 22nd, Sergeant Fields recalled an old folklore ritual from the town archives. The house's feeding could be disrupted if the trapped were acknowledged and drawn into the physical world through fire and symbolic resistance. Candles were arranged, salt sprinkled in patterns, and the Harrows chanted protective words from Fields' notes. At first it seemed ineffective. Shadows lashed out, walls groaned, and Grace screamed, the sound slicing through their souls. Then, the doll circle in the attic began to tremble. Shadows writhed, screaming in anger. January 25th, Grace suddenly spoke clearly, her own voice returning. "Mommy, Daddy, it's not me. I'm trapped. The house, it wants me." A horrifying realization hit Robert. The Grace before them was a projection, a mixture of the real child and the house's influence. The real Grace existed somewhere in the depths, her essence consumed by decades of fear and darkness. Lisa's hands shook. It's pretending to be her. It's testing us, mocking us." The house's shadows coalesced into a massive humanoid form, combining features of all past victims towering over them. It was not just alive, it was conscious, intelligent, and cruel. "Join us, or leave nothing behind," the figure boomed, voice a chorus of all the missing families. January 28th. Robert and Lisa knew brute force was useless. They began the ritual properly, chanting protective words while stepping carefully through the circle of salt and candles. Shadows recoiled as if burned, hissing. Grace's projection screamed, "Help me!" Robert moved closer, reaching into the shadows with bare hands, risking the unknown. The house thrashed violently, walls shaking, ceilings groaning. Lisa grabbed Grace's small hand, not the projection, but the real essence, glimpsed briefly in a shimmering corner. A flash of light erupted from the circle, and the house shrieked in rage. For a moment, silence. Then, stillness. January 30th. When the Harrows awoke, they were outside the house, collapsed in the yard. Grace ran to them, whole and unharmed, or at least appearing so. Her eyes, though, carried an unsettling depth, as if something remained inside. The house sat silently, still, a red brick facade seemingly normal. Sergeant Fields muttered, "It didn't lose. It paused. It always waits." Robert looked back. Why would anyone invent something like this? No one answered. The truth was too terrible. January 31st, neighbors reported hearing laughter late at night. The dolls in the attic were rearranged again, though the house appeared empty. Grace sometimes spoke to unseen figures, whispering secrets she shouldn't know. The Harrows moved away, but the shadow of the house followed them in dreams. Even decades later, the events would haunt their nights. The house's influence had been confronted, but not ended. It waited, patient, watching, learning. The Harrows had survived the house in Virginia, escaping its immediate grip, but survival came at a cost. Grace returned, yet something remained inside her. The house, patient and intelligent, continued to watch. And decades later, its shadow still haunted all who had faced it. February 1980, Robert and Lisa relocated to a quiet suburb, seeking normalcy. They hoped distance would erase the terror, but Grace behaved differently from other children. At first, she was silent, withdrawn. She didn't play as she once had, preferring corners and dimly lit rooms. Occasionally, she would speak to shadows that weren't there. "Wait, don't touch it. It's watching." Robert and Lisa exchanged uneasy glances. The child they had rescued seemed whole, but subtle signs suggested the house's influence remained. March 1980, both parents developed insomnia and hypervigilance. Every creak in the new house, every gust of wind reminded them of the basement, the shadows, the whispers. Robert stopped working long nights at the bank. Lisa became obsessed with recording every unusual sound in the house. Neighbors noticed their odd behavior. "You two need a break," said Mr. Harrington, who lived across the street. "You look haunted." They laughed weakly but knew the truth. The house had changed them. Fear was no longer just a reaction. It had become a constant presence. June 1980. Grace's strange abilities. Over the months, Grace demonstrated unsettling behaviors. She would know things before they happened. Flickers of light. Small objects moving as she passed, whispering warnings that were eerily accurate. One evening, Lisa watched her in the kitchen. Grace pointed toward the garden, saying, "They're outside." Robert looked. Nothing. Moments later, a large branch fell near the window. The warning had saved them, but who or what was Grace sensing? It became clear. The house's influence had partially followed her. While her body had returned, part of its consciousness lingered within her. December 1980, desperate to understand, Robert consulted town historians and discovered records of unexplained disappearances on the streets spanning over a century. Families vanish. Children return, but not entirely themselves. One archivist told him. The words hit hard. Grace was alive, but the house had left its mark, an imprint of fear and manipulation that could never be fully erased. 85 and 1999, years passed. The Harrows moved multiple times, each time hoping the distance would sever the lingering connection. But Grace occasionally spoke of the house as if it were watching from afar, sometimes pointing at shadows others could not see. Lisa kept a journal detailing every incident, even decades later. She speaks of corridors that do not exist, doors that open into nothing. We moved, but it followed her in some way. I don't know how or why, only that it did. Robert became withdrawn, often staring at maps of Virginia, tracing the house's location as if he could anticipate its next move. 1000. Grace grew into adulthood with subtle but persistent traits left by the house. Heightened perception, strange awareness of people around her, and occasional unprovoked panic attacks hinted at the influence still lingering inside. Though she led a relatively normal life, she avoided isolated houses, dark attics, and basements. She spoke rarely of her childhood, but when she did, her words chilled those who heard them. It's patient. Always patient. It never forgets. Friends dismissed it as imaginative, but her parents knew the truth. 10. The Harrows occasionally returned to Virginia, though never near the original house. They learned that no one had occupied it since 1980. Neighbors claimed to see lights flickering at night, shadows moving past curtained windows, and small childlike laughter carried by the wind. Robert, now aged and frail, whispered to Lisa one night, "It's still there, waiting, watching. Every family that disappears, every child that returns, it's learning, and one day it will want more." Lisa nodded silently. Fear had become a lifelong companion, a shadow that never left. 20. Grace now had children of her own. On quiet nights, she sometimes caught herself staring at corners of rooms, listening to whispers that weren't there. Sometimes she spoke to them softly, "Do not wander alone. Do not ignore the shadows. Always watch." The house's legacy had endured. Its influence persisted, subtle but insidious, capable of reaching across decades and miles. The world would never know the full truth, but the Harrows did, and somewhere in Virginia, the house waited patiently for the next family. It did not forget. It never would. The end.